This video will last for 30 days. You can go to YouTube, Tabernacle of Praise, Mansfield, Georgia, and it will be there forever, as long as we know. But today we are in lesson 12, right?
Yes.
Lesson 12, and we'll have 2 more after this one, then our 14-week will be complete. We're going to start the video, and if you're, and like I said, if you weren't able to get on right away, you can go ahead and tune in to YouTube later and pull it up there. But we hope you enjoy the class, and don't forget to look into End Time Ministries out of Plano, Texas, Only Source. They have a great plethora of information if you're looking to know more about the end times. Thank you.
The book of Revelation is divided into 3 segments. John was told to write the things which thou hast seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. That's Revelation 1:19. Revelation chapter 1 is a vision that John saw. Chapters 2 and 3 are letters written to 7 churches in existence 2,000 years ago. The prophetic portion of Revelation begins in chapter 4, verse 1.
After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter.
This is a major turning point that many people miss. It is a key area that has caused many to misinterpret the book of Revelation. Another very important thing to understand is that the future is described in 4 different ways through 4 major categories of events. These categories form a skeletal structure for the book of Revelation. They are 7 seals, 7 thunders, 7 trumpets, and 7 vials. Although the seals, trumpets, and vials are explained in some length, the thunders are not explained at all.
And when the 7 thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write, and I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not.
God only allowed John to write what he wanted understood. The structural elements of the book of Revelation are revealed when you compare the seals, trumpets, and vials. The seals are the long story ending with the second coming of Jesus Christ back to the earth and the time of the Battle of Armageddon. The trumpets are the shorter story ending at the Battle of Armageddon. And the vials or bowls are the very short story ending at the Battle of Armageddon. Each of these structural elements begin at different times, but they all end at the same time, proving conclusively the book of Revelation is not written in chronological order. The 7 vials do not actually take place until after the mark of the beast is administered. We know this because when the first vial is unleashed, the Bible says it will be unleashed upon the people that have taken the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is administered during the Great Tribulation. And from this, we know the vials will be enacted at the time of the very end. Not only are there skeletal structures in the book of Revelation of the 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 vials, the book of Revelation also has parenthetical chapters, a colored commentary. For example, chapter 12 tells about a war in heaven when Satan is cast down and confined to the earth for the final 3½ years. Revelation 13 gives a view of the one world government and the Antichrist, the one world religion and the false prophet, who will be the leader of the one world religion, and the mark of the beast, the economic system of the end-time one world governmental system. Understanding the skeletal structure of Revelation and that other chapters are included to give a fuller understanding will help us better understand Revelation as a whole. Listen as my father-in-law, Irvin Baxter, recounts the miraculous to him. It begins in Revelation chapter number 8, verse number 6. Listen to it. And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. And when we deal with these 7 trumpets, we're not going to start from 1 through 7, because the way God helped me to understand the 7 trumpets, He first of all helped me to understand trumpet number 3. And I feel like that if that's the way God helped me to understand, that's probably the best way for me to try to help you understand. So let's look at the 3rd trumpet first. It's Revelation chapter 8, verse 10 through 11. And the 3rd angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the 3rd part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the 3rd part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died because of the waters. So don't forget wormwood, and don't forget that many men died because of the waters. Now, I'll never forget how this all came to me. What happened was, it was back in 1995, and I was working on the manual for our course called Understanding the End Time. And it was the first edition of that course. And I had heard a rumor that wormwood meant Chernobyl. That the word Chernobyl was the Russian word for wormwood. But when you deal with Bible prophecy, you hear all kinds of theories. And I had learned not just to accept everything that came my way. I mean, I've got 75 antichrists in my filing cabinet right now. I mean, so many people, a lot of people contacted me and said, I know Ronald Reagan is the Antichrist because his name is Ronald Wilson Reagan. Ronald has 6 letters, Wilson has 6 letters, Reagan has 6 letters. Therefore, his name is 666, and that's the number of the name of the Antichrist. Well, obviously he was not the Antichrist, but I get all kinds of theories. So when I hear something, a possible explanation of one of the prophecies of the Bible, I listen. But I just don't swallow the hook, line, and sinker, because I found out over time that that's not the best thing to do. So I was working on my manual for the first Understanding the End Time production, and everything was flowing that day. I was sitting there, I was typing, and everything was really going great. And when writers are writing, sometimes it flows and sometimes it doesn't. Well, this particular day it was flowing. My door was shut to my office. I was all alone. I was excited. I was behind on my deadlines, but I was catching up, and so I was really feeling good. And as I was writing, nothing about wormwood, nothing about Chernobyl, nothing about the 3rd trumpet. It was like something spoke to me. I thought it was God, actually. It just spoke to me and said, that rumor you heard about wormwood being Chernobyl, I want you to check that out. And I remember thinking in my mind, now I'm all by myself in my office, I remember thinking in my mind, wait a minute, I'm busy, I'm doing good, everything is flowing, I don't want to stop and do that right now. And furthermore, 3 weeks at the library trying to dig out this piece of information, I just don't have time for it right now. I have to get this manual finished. And it's like God spoke to me and said, it won't take you any time. Just pick up the phone, call the library, and they'll do the research for you. Well, as I thought about this, I was really a little bit frustrated, to tell you the truth. But since I thought it might be the voice of God, I thought, well, I probably should do this. So I opened the drawer to my desk, I pulled out the phone book and looked up the number, called the library, asked for a reference librarian, and I said, ma'am, this is Pastor Baxter, and I heard a rumor that the Russian word for wormwood is Chernobyl. Is there any way you could check that out for me and let me know if that's true or not? She said, it is true, because you see, the Russians used wormwood for medicinal purposes. It turned their tongues black, and the Russian word for black is Chernobyl. And consequently, they began to call wormwood Chernobyl. And she rattled off the awfulest bunch of information you've ever seen in your life. And so I was taken aback by this. I was not prepared for her to just answer me off the cuff like that. And I said, well, ma'am, I'm going to be right
write an article about this. Could I get some documentation, some books, some page numbers? She said, I'll call you back. She called me back 20 minutes later. She had the books, she had the page numbers, and I was really wowed by this time. One reference she had was the Dictionary of the Russian Language, and it had, as a definition, Chernobylnik, and it said a variety of absinthe, which was in parentheses wormwood, with a red, brown, or deep purple stem. There was in a Russian dictionary, and it refers to wormwood under the heading Chernobylnik. Well, I was really impressed. Well, actually, she talked to me for probably 10 minutes, and finally it was time to go, and I thanked her very much. I said, but before I let you go, I have to know something. It's not normal that you would have known this all off the top of your head. How did you know all this? She said, oh, I'm working on my doctorate in Russian right now, and I've been studying these things. Well, needless to say, I was in awe, because I felt like God told me to call the library, that they would do the research for me, and in 30 minutes time or so, I had the information I needed. Well, what happened was, from there on, I began to do more research. I found a book called The Truth About Chernobyl, and I read that book. It was written by one of the scientists that was there. It was very interesting. But let's take a look real quick at the actual nuclear power plant of Chernobyl. It's located in the Ukraine, actually. This was when the Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. And the town where most of the workers lived was a town called Pripyat. There was about 40,000 people who lived there. Now, you're seeing a picture of the power plant before the explosion. And what happened was, let's see if I can go through this with you very carefully, because it's important. It was on April the 26th of 1986 at 1:26 a.m. in the morning. A Russian scientist was in charge of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant at the time, and he decided to conduct some experiments. In order to do this particular experiment, he had to disable some of the safety features. But he thought it was okay, and so he did. He disabled the safety features. Then he gave the command to raise the rods, which allowed the nuclear process to begin. Well, he was watching his meters, but it didn't catch it in time. Within about 30 seconds or so, the power plant began to overheat, the reactor began to overheat. And suddenly there was this powerful explosion that took place. And you're going to actually see a part of the explosion. The first explosion knocked the concrete lid off of the power plant. The concrete lid weighed about 2 million pounds. It knocked it off the power plant. It came down cocked. And then the second explosion drove a nuclear cloud 1 mile into the air. And leaving the lid cocked, it left the atmosphere open to a full nuclear fire. Well, little did they know at the time that they had just witnessed the worst nuclear disaster in the history of the world. Before it was over with, there would be 10 times as much nuclear radiation released at Chernobyl as was released at the bombing of Hiroshima in World War II. Okay, well now, here's what happened next. The workers, they didn't know what was going on. They heard this big explosion. They ran down to the source of the sound. Two of the workers pulled the door open and found themselves staring full-faced into a nuclear fire. It was so incredibly hot when they opened that door that it thrust them back, and they fell to the floor where they knew the coolest air would be, and they laid there until the heat somewhat dissipated, because now the lid is off of the nuclear reactor and all the heat is going up. They were finally able to get up, and they made their way back down to the nurses' station. It was about a block they had to walk. By the time they arrived, their skin was hanging off of their arms in ribbons. Both of those technicians died within a very short amount of time. Now that's not all that happened. Immediately, because of the level of this emergency, fire trucks came from everywhere. And when the fire trucks came, they fought this fire, many of them not realizing that they were actually signing their own death warrant by being there. They're fighting a full nuclear fire. There were fire trucks there. There were helicopters that came in. And you can see some of the monuments here built to the people who bravely fought that fire, even though many of them died within 30 days or so. And the ones who did survive suffered all kinds of ramifications of their exposure to this high level of radiation. Well, as time went along, all of the equipment was brought in. The fire trucks that were brought in to fight the nuclear fire became so contaminated with radiation that they had to bring bulldozers in and bury these fire trucks. And then, in the process, the bulldozers absorbed so much radiation that they had to bring in more bulldozers to bury the bulldozers. It was an horrific thing. And furthermore, they're fighting the fire with helicopters, and you can see some of the helicopters that are still in the area, and they were dumping water onto the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in an attempt to put out the fire. And you can see another picture here. Look at this. It's a graveyard of radioactive vehicles. And then at Chernobyl, it became a ghost town. Pripyat was the town of about 40,000 people where most of the workers lived. Well, it's a no man's land today. It has been declared off limits because no one can live there. Everything is contaminated. The vegetation, much of it does not grow there anymore. And to live there would be to live at risk of your own life. Now, the wild animals, they come there, but that's about it. Now, about this time, I was writing an article on this subject, and I went to the library so I could have solitude, get away from my office, and the place I was going to write was behind the video desk. And as I went behind this video desk, I passed the video clerk, and I said to him, just on a lark, do you have any videos about Chernobyl? Because I was still in the learning process. And he said, you know, I think I have one. He brought it to me. It was put out by the Humanities. And they had a machine there where I could look at it on the spot. And I was so curious about this because I was writing about it at the time. So I went over there and I pushed in the video and I began to watch. And it's amazing what I saw when I pushed in this video, because right on the front came up Chernobyl, the bitter taste of wormwood. Now this was not put out by a religious organization. It was not put out by a prophecy ministry. And yet here they somehow had associated Chernobyl with wormwood, and the prophecy said that a star by the name of wormwood was cast into the earth. Now that's not all it said, because it had many other things to tell me in this video. The main message of this video was that the waters made the Chernobyl nuclear accident so deadly. Here's what happened. Let me see if I can tell you the story. When the nuclear cloud was driven 1 mile into the air, the winds caught the cloud, and they carried it first of all into Sweden, then into Italy, then into Germany, then into Great Britain. And during this time, it rained incessantly. I do not know whether the nuclear explosion had anything to do with the rain or not, but it rained for about 4 or 5 days. The result was it brought all of the nuclide, cesium-137, down to the earth, and everywhere the rains hit, it created what's called brownouts. There's many places in Europe where nothing will grow for 100 years. Furthermore, the rivers filled up with this nuclide, cesium-137, and anybody that drank this water, they ingested this nuclide. Well, what happens when cesium-137 is ingested, it goes to your bone marrow. And the interesting thing is, it has a half-life of 30 years. Now, watch this. The rain came down, filled the waters of Europe, and it was radioactive. And everything it touched became radioactive. There were reindeer being raised for domestic consumption in Europe, about 100,000 of them. All of them had to be killed. And you can even see the workers, as they were trying to control this unprecedented disaster, they actually had Geiger counters measuring the level of radioactivity. It goes way beyond the safe zone here. It was an accident that was unprecedented. There's never been anything like it in the history of the world. And so why should we be surprised that it's located in the prophecy of the Bible? Now, cesium-137 has a half-life of about 30 years. And many of the children especially were affected because they ingested this. And one of the things that cesium-137 does, it attacks your thyroid gland. And in the area of Pripyat, in that area around the Ukraine, the thyroid cancer is about 248 times the normal thyroid cancer rate, and many people are still suffering. Altogether, as a result of the Chernobyl nuclear accident of April the 26th of 1986, about 125,000 people have died. The scientists and the doctors estimate that around 2 million people are infected, and eventually what happens is when cesium-137 lays in your bone marrow, it will eventually cause a person to have cancer. So it's very interesting.
3 months after the Chernobyl nuclear accident, on July 26, 1986, the New York Times published an article titled "The Talk of Moscow, Chernobyl Fallout, Apocalyptic Tale and Fear." A prominent Russian writer recently produced a tattered old Bible and with a practiced hand turned to Revelations. "Listen," he said, "this is incredible." And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters, and the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. The writer, an atheist, used a dictionary to show the Ukrainian word for wormwood, a bitter wild herb, used as a tonic in rural Russia. The word was Chernobyl. On April 26, 2011, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych and Russian President Dmitry Medvedev laid the foundation stone to the memorial commemorating the liquidators to the Chernobyl nuclear accident. Liquidators are those who went into contaminated zones and dealt with the consequences of the disaster in every way. The name of the memorial, the Star of Wormwood Memorial Complex. At the site, they placed an approximately 30-foot tall iron angel sounding a trumpet. Quite significant to prophecy students. According to Chernobyl Adventure, which provides tours of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and I'm quoting, "From the west of the alley of the abandoned villages, the monument Trumpeting Angel is placed. There is one version that the name of the city is associated with Chernobyl, or the grass that is better known to us as wormwood. This fact inspired many myths related to the Bible. According to the predictions of John the theologian, the third angel sounded and a large star fell from heaven, burning like a lamp, and fell on a third of the rivers and the sources of water. The name of this star is Wormwood. And a third of the waters became wormwood, and many of the people died of the waters because they became bitter. The monument Trumpeting Angel symbolizes the prophecy about the Star of Wormwood. Atlas Obscura published an article titled "Monument of the Third Angel." It states, while English language Bibles translate the name as wormwood, Artemisia absinthium, in local Ukrainian and Russian Bibles, the name of the star is pollen, a word which here is used interchangeably for numerous plants within the larger mugwort or Artemisia family. Chernobyl, the plant from which the town takes its name, is one such pollen. As a result of this connection, many local Christians believe that the disaster had been foretold by their Bibles.
So the third trumpet sounded on April 26th of 1986. This being true, when did the first trumpet sound? When did the second trumpet sound? Because obviously they would be before the third trumpet. And I asked myself that question. Well, let's look now at the sounding of the second trumpet. It's found in Revelation chapter number 8, verse 8 and 9. And the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood. And when I went back to study after, I felt like I understood the third trumpet, the Chernobyl nuclear accident. When I went back to study these others, I said, a third part of the ships were destroyed? That's never happened. I would surely know about that. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm off. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something here. However, about a year later, I was thinking about everything, and my mind went to World War II. Now, World War II is the greatest disaster the world has ever known. 52 million people died there. And I thought, I wonder how many ships participated in World War II and how many of them were sunk. So I asked my research assistant, Kathy, I said, Kathy, go to the library, see if you can find out how many ships participated in World War II and how many were sunk. She came back about 3 days later, and she laid on my desk the statistics she had dug up, and I looked at them, and I looked at Kathy, and I said, Kathy, I didn't intend for you to cook the books. I want the truth. Well, what she showed me was that there were 105,127 ships that participated in World War II, and 36,387 of them were sunk, like we did the calculation. It's about 1/3 on the money. And I said, Kathy, are you sure? She said, the library helped me. This is the way it was. 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. Well, the rest of the prophecy says that there would be a great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea. I had seen pictures of nuclear explosions, and they looked like a huge mountain on fire. And I thought, why should it be incredible that the first nuclear bomb dropped on the human race should be in the book of Revelation? And why should I think it's incredible that World War II, the greatest war the world's ever known by far, 52 million dead? And that's when I realized that in this second trumpet prophecy, I was seeing here the nuclear explosion at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. I became quickly convinced that the second trumpet was World War II. My next question then was, okay, well, what's World War I then? So back to the Bible, Revelation 8, verse number 7. And the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. And they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. I thought, okay, if the second trumpet is World War II, the first trumpet couldn't be World War I, because up until the 20th century, we never had a war with 1 million fatalities, and World War I comes along, they call it the Great War, and there were 8.2 million dead. It was totally unprecedented. So could that possibly be the first trumpet? What does this mean? Hail and fire mingled with blood. And I thought about the new implements of warfare, the bombs, the huge guns, and also it says all green grass was burned up. And I thought I remembered in school studying about a thing called the scorched earth policy. And what happened was most of the battle occurred in World War I between France and Germany, and there was an area in there where the policy was, don't leave anything, burn everything up. That way, if you lose the territory, you leave no resources for the enemy to live off of the ground. So don't leave the crops, don't leave any green thing, and they called it the scorched earth policy. Well, after I studied for a while, I came to the conclusion that the first trumpet was probably World War I. Of course, that's when biological weapons were first used. It was horrendous. Our men and the Allied troops and the German troops all engaging in unprecedented warfare. It was absolutely terrible what they went through as they fought this horrible battle. So when I looked at the prophecy and looked at what happened in World War I, it made sense to me that World War I would be the sounding of the first trumpet. Okay, now let's summarize everything. Now let's look at it. So this is the overview of the first three trumpets. First trumpet, World War I, 8.2 million dead. Prior to this, there had never been one war with 1 million dead. in 6,000 years of recorded human history. Not one war with 1 million dead. All of a sudden we have this great war, 8.2 million dead. Then, second trumpet, World War II, 52 million dead. 1/3 of the ships destroyed. A great mountain burning with fire. Everything seemed to fit. And then, of course, the third trumpet, Chernobyl. This is where God will open my understanding first. I mean, I had always been taught that all of the trumpets would exist in a final 7-year period. But by that time, God had changed my mind because there's really no proof of that. That's a theory that's embraced, but it's not true. So when I saw this third trumpet, Chernobyl, that happened on April the 26th of 1986, and the word Chernobyl means wormwood. If you were reading a Ukrainian Bible, you would actually read a star with the name of Chernobyl was cast on the earth. I've actually had Ukrainian people come to me since I began to teach this and open their Bibles and say, look, right here it is. It says Chernobyl. Well, that's pretty astounding. So here we have the third trumpet, and the Chernobyl accident was the world's worst nuclear accident, 10 times as much radiation released at Chernobyl as was released at any other, by Hiroshima or by Nagasaki. The fifth trumpet helps us to understand the fourth trumpet. So we're going to go to the fifth trumpet first. The account is Revelation 9, verse 1 and 2. It states there, and the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. Now, I'll never forget, way back in 1990, 1991, Saddam Hussein, who was, of course, the president of Iraq, he decided he wanted to invade Kuwait. He wanted to take control of the oil riches of Kuwait. Already, Iraq was very rich in oil. But now then, if he was able to take Kuwait, he would be that much richer because he had dreams of rebuilding Babylon. He actually had launched an effort to rebuild the city of Babylon. He actually had pictures of himself taken. He had a uniform made to look like Nebuchadnezzar way back in the Old Testament in 586 BC when he destroyed Jerusalem. Saddam Hussein had dreams of destroying Jerusalem again and getting rid of the nation of Israel. So he actually had a uniform made for himself that looked like Nebuchadnezzar, and he actually stood in a chariot and had his picture taken. So he thought that if he could take control of the oil riches of Kuwait, adding that to what he now controlled, that it would enable him to have power and he could become the premier power of the Middle East. So when he invaded Kuwait in the fall of 1990, when that happened, immediately President George Herbert Walker Bush, our president at the time, went to the United Nations, asked for a resolution against Saddam Hussein. The UN passed the resolution, and 29 member nations devoted either troops or military supplies to the battle against Saddam Hussein. So the coalition forces, the world community, went against Saddam Hussein. They began to drive him back out of Kuwait. Now, Hussein thought he had a green light from the United States of America to take this action. Now then, he's very angry. So as he knows he's going to be forced out of Kuwait, he cannot stand before the firepower of the United States of America and all of our allies. So he knows he's going to have to leave, but he's not going to go easy. He decides that he will set 700 of the world's richest oil wells ablaze. The oil wells of Kuwait are very productive. And so he decided to set 700 oil wells ablaze, and he did. Now, when they begin to burn, they actually blocked the sun and the sky for over 3 months. I want you to see, we have a clip from the video, The Fires of Kuwait, and I actually want you to take a look at some of this footage right now. Watch this. Now, you're looking at pictures in the daytime, but it looks like it's midnight. Notice that the firefighters are there. They brought firefighters from all over the world. The fires were so hot that they actually would reach 2,000 degrees, and it was very difficult for the firefighters to fight these fires, and they had to even spray water on their fire trucks continually to keep the metal of the fire trucks from melting. And so for 3 long months, these fires belched smoke into the atmosphere. I have another shot here for you to see of Kuwait at noontime. This is another picture. I think this appeared in one of the magazines. And you're seeing the sky and the sun was blocked out by reason of the smoke. Now, why is this so important? Because the prophecy says this, and I know about one more incident in all human history that could fulfill this particular prophecy. The Bible specifically says that the sun and the sky were darkened by reason of the smoke that came out of the bottomless pit. Now, if the oil is coming out of the earth, then maybe that teaches us the bottomless pit is in the middle of the earth. Let's look at the rest of the passage. Revelation 9, verse 3. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. And they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions, and they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. Okay, what is John saying here? Remember, this is 2,000 years ago. But he's seeing locusts with breastplates of iron, with faces of men. The sound of their wings was the sound of many chariots or many horses running to battle. What do you think John was seeing? Was he seeing helicopters? Was he seeing jet airplanes? All this is written in symbols. He'd never seen a helicopter. He'd never seen a jet airplane. Had no clue what they were. But he said, these are locusts. And they got breastplates of iron, but they have the face of men, and the sound of their wings is the sound of many chariots going to battle. Take a look here at what he may have seen in his vision. I don't know whether this is what he saw. This is one helicopter and how it appeared in one particular shot. Take a look at these helicopters. You know, when boys or girls are in the service and they are pilots of helicopters, sometimes they paint up their helicopters to make it interesting. Look at this, mouth of lions. Does this look like locusts to you? I mean, you gotta admit, this looked a lot like locusts. And take a look at this next shot, because here you see helicopters, breastplates of iron, faces of men. It appears to me that that's what John was seeing, and he was talking about warfare in the 20th century. Now, that's not all the prophecy, however. Let's go a little further. In verse 11, it continues the prophecy, and it says, and they had a king over them, these warriors, these armies, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. Now, if you look up in a dictionary, it defines both the Hebrew Abaddon as the destroyer, and the Greek Apollyon means the destroyer. Some translations of the Bible actually say they had a king over them named the destroyer. Now, way back in 1991, when all this was taking place, I was a subscriber to the German Tribune at the time, and I'll never forget receiving my German Tribune. It was the March 10th of 1991 edition, and I was reading an article about Saddam Hussein and about all that was happening in the Gulf at the time, and the reporter called him Saddam, quote, the destroyer Hussein. Oh, I'd already been wondering about these fires and about the possibility of this prophecy, and I knew that Abaddon and Apollyon meant the destroyer, and here they called Saddam the destroyer Hussein. Now, I had reached no conclusions at the time, but I was wondering, I'll just confess to you. Okay, well, it's about a little while later, actually quite a bit later, 6 years later, in 1997, I still was not certain about all this, but I was a subscriber to the international edition of the Jerusalem Post at the time. I was scheduled to preach out of town one evening, and my wife was going to drive me, and as we were getting ready to leave, my Jerusalem Post had just arrived. She said to me, "You want to take your post along? You might want to read it on the way." And I said, "Well, sure, let's do that." So she's driving, and I'm sitting there reading the Jerusalem Post, and there was a particular story. It was a human interest story back in the middle of the Jerusalem Post. And I was reading this story. It was about the last family out of Baghdad, the last Jewish family out of Baghdad. And the Jerusalem Post was doing an interview with this family that had just arrived in Jerusalem. But what I found so interesting was the lady relating the story was telling about how when Saddam's mother was pregnant with Saddam, that she was having a horrible pregnancy. And the Iraqi doctors recommended an abortion. However, she didn't want to get an abortion, so she moved to the section of Baghdad where the finest doctors were available. They were the Jewish doctors. And the Jewish doctors nursed her through her pregnancy with Saddam Hussein. And in the Jerusalem Post, it said when he was born, she decided to name him Saddam, because Saddam means destroyer, and he almost destroyed her. I looked at that absolutely stunned. And that was sort of the icing on the cake for me. That's when I decided, since I found out that the Arabic word for Saddam actually means destroyer. Now, do you understand what I'm saying to you? I'm saying to you, in the Bible, it said a man by the name of Destroyer is going to unleash the oil fields, the bottomless pit, and the son of the too much here for me to deny, and that's when I reached the conclusions that actually the fifth trumpet sounded in 1991. Okay, now we've got to get back to the fourth trumpet. Let's go now to Revelation chapter 8, verse number 12. It states there, "And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise." Okay, what can this be? Now this is all that's given to us for the fourth trumpet. A third part of the stars, the sun, the moon was smitten, and the sun didn't shine for a third part of the day, the moon did not shine for one third part of the night. Well, I'll just tell you, I was totally stalled on this one. I didn't know what this meant. Now, I did know, however, that there was another prophecy in the Bible given by Jesus Christ himself. This is Matthew chapter 24, verse 22. And it says there, "And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." So what do I make of all this? I didn't know the answer. And I had a lot of people when I would teach the third trumpet, and the second trumpet, and the first trumpet, and the fifth trumpet, everybody said, "Yeah, what about the fourth?" And I had to say, "I don't know," because I didn't know. Well, my wife is one of my best fans, and also she's one of my biggest critics. So consequently, she was driving along one day, and she was thinking about the fact that I didn't understand the fourth trumpet, and she wanted me to understand these things to be able to deal with all these issues. And so she said to God, as she was driving along in the car, she said, "God, how are you going to shorten the days?" Well, let me back up just a moment. She came home that day and she said, "God spoke to me today." I said, "He did?" Well, I thought she was setting me up because she'd been out shopping, that God spoke to her to buy a new dress, so she was maybe just kidding me. But I saw she was serious, and since we've been married like 30 years at the time, she never said that to me before. Not in all of our married days. She never looked at me and said, "God spoke to me." So I sobered up and I took it serious. And I said to her, "So what did he say?" She said, "Well, I asked him, God, how are you going to shorten the days?" And he said, "I already have." And she said, "I said back to God as I'm riding down the road, 'Well, how, Lord?'" And he spoke back to her in her mind, "I've speeded everything up, but men don't realize it. It's already a done deal." Well, I thought about that for a while, and I started studying some more, and I thought, well, God, if you're going to shorten the days, are you going to shorten the number of days, which some people think, or are you going to shorten the length of each day? Well, I decided he had to shorten the length of each day because if he shortened the number of days, he would mess the Bible up. Because in Daniel chapter 12, verse 11 and 12, it says, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So from the abomination of desolation till the culmination of everything, till the battle of Armageddon, is going to be 1,290 days. And then it says, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,335th day. So if God would shorten the number of days, then this scripture would have to be changed. And the Bible says, thy word, O Lord, is forever settled in heaven. So I was convinced from my knowledge of the Bible and from my knowledge of God that he was not going to change the number of days. So the answer obviously was that he must be going to shorten the length of each day. And really the prophecy of Revelation says that. The sun would not shine for 1/3 part of the day. The moon would not shine for 1/3 part of the night. So I thought, okay. Well, then I said to my wife, Judy, I said, but babe, this can't be. Because if the days are shorter and the clocks are moving faster, men are still able to run the 4-minute mile. Now, this was my engineering background sitting in here, my mathematical background. And I said, you know, if the clocks are moving faster, the mile is still as long as it was, and men can't run any faster. So that means it should be taking them 5 minutes at least to run a 4-minute mile. And she looked at me as only she can, as only a woman can. And she said, I can answer your question, but I still know God spoke to me. As though that settles it. Well, about a week or so later, she and I were in a restaurant, and there was a professor from Richmond, Indiana there that followed a lot of our teachings. And he happened to be at the restaurant, and so Judy went up to him and said, hey, she needed to tell him about what she felt like God spoke to her. But she said, Irvin says that it won't work because men couldn't run the 4-minute mile anymore, and they still are. Well, the professor looked at both of us and said, oh, that's no problem. Don't you understand Einstein's theory of relativity? Well, sure, I read all that for breakfast every morning, right? Well, he said, don't you understand that time and speed are relative one to the other? So when one speeds up, the other speeds up. So I'm standing there trying to absorb all this, and my wife is looking like the cat's meow. You know, I told you, here's the college professor, he's backing me up. Well, about a week or so later, I was on the phone with another friend who was a pretty intelligent guy, and I was talking to him about it. He said, oh, that's no problem. I was talking about the 4-minute mile again. He said, that's no problem. Don't you understand Einstein's theory of relativity? So what do? I'm off to the bookstore, and I buy 2 or 3 books on Einstein's theory of relativity. I haven't read them yet, but I'm going to get around to it one of these days. But anyway, it certainly, since I was convinced the 3rd trumpet sounded and the 5th trumpet sounded, it seemed like to me that maybe my wife, in fact, was right as much as I hated to admit it. Okay, so when did the 4th trumpet sound? If it did sound, when did it sound? Well, we know the 3rd trumpet sounded in 1986, and we know the 5th trumpet sounded in 1991. So is there any major event between 1986 and 1991 that could maybe be related to the shortening of the days? Well, back in 1968, God allowed me to understand that the Berlin Wall was going to come down, the 2 Germanys would be reunited. I actually put it in a book that I published in 1986. I stated that the Berlin Wall was coming down, the 2 Germanys would be reunited, and that would be the beginning of the New World Order. Well, that was going to be a turning point. Matter of fact, that's what prompted me to start in Time Magazine, because I felt like that was really the beginning of the end time. Well, furthermore, 10 years after 1989, Merrill Lynch actually put out a full-page ad in USA Today, and the title said, "The world is 10 years old today. Congratulations, happy birthday." And they were actually stating that the new world began when the Berlin Wall fell on November the 9th of 1989. Well, recently I was listening to a speech by Mr. Tony Blair. He has a new foundation called the Tony Blair Foundation. It's the combination of faith and globalization. And he said that globalization began with the fall of the Berlin Wall. So it's very much a pivotal event. And I said, well, God, maybe that's when you speeded everything up. And I think that probably is correct.
In November 2009, the London School of Economics published an article titled "The Global 1989, the Year That Changed the World." It states, 1989 may have sped up world historical time, but it marked neither its end nor its beginning. Rather, like the Bionic Man, the post-1989 era is quicker, stronger, faster. We have seen the acceleration of means of organizing politics, economics, and social life, but not their reformulation. Now we come to the prophecy of the sixth trumpet. On May 17, 2022, USAWatchdog.com published an article titled "Third of Global Population Killed in Next War Cycle" by Charles Nenner. In the article, renowned geopolitical and financial cycle expert Charles Nenner was asked, how many casualties will there be in the next world war? And I'm quoting, "It's very interesting how you calculate something like that. It's the same way you calculate a cycle in IBM. When you see IBM going down, you can get an upside price target, which we have. You can do the same thing on the war cycle. About 1/3 of the population is not going to survive in this world. So, more than 2.5 billion people are going to die in the next world war that is just around the corner," he was asked. Nenner says, yes, the numbers say if you have a world war, it's going to take out 1/3 of the population. That's preposterous. No war has even come close to killing that many people. It's unthinkable. Not if you understand the prophecy of the sixth trumpet war. Revelation 9:13-16 says,
And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. And I heard the number of them.
The Bible tells us where World War III will begin. Saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which were bound in the great river Euphrates. That's Revelation 9:14. The Euphrates River starts in Turkey, flows down through Syria, enters into the northern boundary of Iraq, and then empties into the Persian Gulf. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers meet to form the last 50 to 60 mile border between Iraq and Iran. It is this area where the Bible says World War III will originate. Additionally, because over 2 billion people are prophesied to die in this war, it is doubtful the war will be contained to this area. The entire Middle East region has a population of just under 400 million. Therefore, we know this war will start there, but will spread out around the world. Revelation 9:15 in the New Living Translation states, Then the four angels who had been prepared for this hour and day and month and year were turned loose to kill 1/3 of all the people on the earth. The angels who are bound in the Euphrates River are spirits. The Bible tells us angels are ministering spirits to us who are the heirs of salvation. However, these four angels are not ministering angels. They are part of the 1/3 portion of angels who rebelled with Satan. They are evil spirits. We know these angels are evil because this verse says they are bound. When they are loosed, their assignment is to kill 1/3 of mankind. Although it would be a futile effort, we could speculate about why the Third World War I do not have the answer. However, I do know studies have been done concerning the unsustainable population growth, and World War III scenarios have been considered in the reports. In October 2014, The Guardian published an article titled "Global Overpopulation Would Withstand War, Disasters, and Disease." Professor Barry Brook, who co-led the study at the University of Adelaide in Australia, states in the article, "We were surprised that a 5-year World War III scenario mimicking the same proportion of people killed in the First and Second World Wars combined barely registered a blip on the human population trajectory this century." The scope of World War III will be enormous. Just like any war, the propaganda machine will spin a plethora of reasons why the world should support this war. Again, I do not know why this war will occur. However, it will happen because the prophecies always come to pass. Who will be involved in the war? Revelation 9:16 from the CSB translation states, "The number of mounted troops was 200 million. I heard their number." Revelation 9:16 foretells an army of 200 million will participate in this war. There is currently no nation that has 200 million active soldiers. However, do you remember when Russia began its full-scale military invasion into Ukraine in 2022? The Ukrainian government announced that all Ukrainian men ages 18 through 60 were barred from leaving the country. It was all hands on deck to fight the Russians. At the beginning of that war, many speculated it was the beginning of World War III. However, according to this prophecy, I know it wasn't. If we were to combine the population of both Russia and Ukraine, it would only be approximately 190 million, which would make it impossible to field a 200 million man force. However, there are some nations that can. In October 1998, Colonel Larry M. Wurtzel prepared a report titled "China's Military Potential" for the Strategic Studies Institute, the U.S. Army War College, 122 Forbes Avenue, Carlisle, Pennsylvania. In the report, Mr. Wurtzel states, China's standing armed force of some 2.8 million active soldiers in uniform is the largest military force in the world. Approximately 1 million reservists and some 15 million militia back them up. With a population of over 1.2 billion people, China also has a potential manpower base of another 200 million males fit for military service available at any time. In addition to its wealth of manpower, China is a nuclear power. Does this mean China will be part of this end-time war? It is highly likely. However, there are two other entities that could actually field a 200 million man army. The Islamic world has a population of approximately 1.9 billion. The country of India has about 1.35 billion in population. Any of these entities could fulfill this prophecy. And we must consider the Islamic faction, since this war emanates from the Euphrates River, which is at this time controlled by Islamic nations. Furthermore, we can be very sure the United States will be involved in this war. America currently has thousands of troops stationed in the Euphrates River region and also has the nuclear firepower to kill 2.7 billion people. Will this war be nuclear? Revelation 9:17 through 19 says,
And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth, and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire, and by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth, and in their tails. For their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt.
We must understand, John was doing his best 2,000 years ago to describe modern day warfare. He had never seen a firecracker, let alone a nuclear missile. Nevertheless, if you look closely, it appears as if he is detailing some sort of missile attack, quite possibly nuclear. I say this because the conflict that is going to be triggered when World War III begins will engulf the whole world. And to kill approximately 2.7 billion human beings, it is unlikely that it will be anything other than a nuclear war. In Revelation 9:20, John calls the fire, smoke, and brimstone plagues, and the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues. An Old Testament passage concerning the usage of nuclear weapons at the Battle of Armageddon might help us to understand the same plague will be utilized at the Sixth Trumpet War. Zechariah 14:12 teaches there will be nuclear weapons at Armageddon, and it says,
And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth.
According to all accounts of what happened to people in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the flesh fell from people's bodies and their eyes dropped from their sockets. Considering the amount of people killed and the plagues in both Zechariah 14 and Revelation 9, it is highly likely, if not certain, the Sixth Trumpet War will be nuclear. Finally, we come to the seventh trumpet. Revelation 11:15 through 18 says,
And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord, and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And the nations were angry, and their wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth.
when the seventh trumpet sounds, the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. God's wrath will come, rewards will be given to the saints. This is the second coming of Jesus Christ. The Apostle Paul taught us about the last trumpet in 1 Corinthians 15:51 through 53. It says,
Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality.
those who have died, who were born again, will be raised from the dead. Those who are still alive and serving God will be changed from mortality to immortality in the twinkling of an eye. Those who were alive and those who were raised from the dead will all be caught up together to meet the Lord in the air and forever be with the Lord. 1 Thessalonians 4:16 through 17 gives another account of the last trumpet. It says,
For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord.
The most critical thing about this seventh trumpet prophecy is the rapture. Romans 8:11 says concerning those who want to be part of the rapture,
But if the spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his spirit that dwelleth in you.
to be in the rapture, you must make sure you have received the wonderful gift of the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost is the power that shall raise you up in that last day. God bless you as you prepare for the soon return of the Lord to this earth.
Thank you all for joining us today. I want to encourage you, we are in our 12th week. We'll be doing 13. We will not be having class next Sunday. It's Mother's Day. We hope everybody has a wonderful Mother's Day. We'll resume and we'll have the last two classes. I think the last one will be on the 24th, if I'm not mistaken. So we got 2 more classes. I'll challenge you this week if you, because we teach a post-trib rapture or second coming. I want to challenge you to find out what the first mention of pre-tribulation was. So you can find that through your historical facts, but thank you for joining in. If you have any questions, you can inbox us and we'll get back with you and get those answers to you. Thank you for joining us. We're going to end in prayer. Lord Jesus, thank you for this day. We ask you to bless each and every person that this touches, and we ask you just to